Սկսենք արդեն, այո, շատ լավ։ Բարև ձեզ, ուզում եմ ողջունել ձեր բոլորին, որ եկել եք մեր այսօրվա շատ հետաքրքրական քննարկման, որ կոչվում է Հայաստանի արհեստական բանականության վրա հենված աբական ռազմավարություններ ազգային հաջողության համար։ Ուզում եմ ձեզնից ներողություն խնդրել, որ մենք պանելը բիթբարենք անգլերենով, հաշվի առնելով թեմայի տեխնիկական բնույթը առաջին օրեն, երկրորդ կողմից էլ այնքան արագ է զարգանում, որ նույնիսկ անգլերենով սահմանումները անընդհատ փոխվում են եւ փորձել դա հայերեն թարգմանել կարող է մի քիչ բարդ լինի. Thank you all for coming to this afternoon's session entitled Armenia's AI-Driven Future, Strategies for National Success. I'd like to introduce my co-panelists. First on Zoom, we will have Raffi Krikorian, who's the Managing Director and Chief Technology Officer for Emerson Collective. I think we have Raffi should be online soon. Perouz Taslakian, who's an AI research scientist at ServiceNow, based out of Canada. And finally, many of you know Hrant Khachatrian, the director of YerevaNN, a lab that focuses on machine learning and AI research. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. So let me start by introducing the topic. So artificial intelligence, or AI, presents a transformative opportunity for nations worldwide, and Armenia stands at a critical juncture to harness this potential. This talk will explore how AI can fundamentally alter the job landscape. We're going to talk a lot about that, actually, driving economic growth and societal advancements. Armenia can position itself as a leader in innovation, fostering a robust and dynamic economy. On the flip side, we also have some challenges that come out of the world shifting to AI, in particular AI and software development, and other tasks that used to be sort of human-driven but can now be driven by technology. We'll also outline the strategic steps required for Armenia to capitalize on this technological revolution, inspiring a future where AI-driven growth propels the nation into a new era of prosperity. This is critical for us. I think we've heard several other speakers, starting with the Prime Minister yesterday, the panel that just ended on investing in critical infrastructure in Armenia. A lot of this will depend on fundamental continued economic growth, and AI will certainly can play a big role in that, or can help actually put some brakes on that if we're not careful, if we don't make the transition. So what I'd like to do is first ask Raffi Krikorian to kind of walk us through on the latest thinking on the development of AI globally. He'll touch on kind of the major trends that are taking place in the development of AI and how it impacts the world. And then I'll ask Perouz to give some examples from sort of more directed research in AI from a private sector perspective. Perouz's group focuses on, there are these large language models, ChatGPT and others. Her group is focused on developing specific language models to address specific tasks, and we see, and Hrant will get into this as well, we'll see that a lot of the power for AI will actually come from more of this directed research rather than what OpenAI or Google or Microsoft or the others are doing. And then Hrant will focus more on specifically what's been happening in AI development in Armenia and where we can sort of think about placing bets. I'm actually very thankful for the conference organizers that we have 90 minutes for this session, because I'm sure they'll have a lot to say to start with. We'll hopefully have a very rich discussion and leave ample time for your questions. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Raffi Krikorian, who we can see on screen. Thank you, Raffi, for being available so early your time, and very much looking forward to what you have to say. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Raffi. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. My name is Raffi Krikorian. I was born in New York to an Armenian father, who grew up in Beirut, to a Filipino mother. Growing up, Armenian was my first language. I used to be a VP of engineering at Twitter, where we built large-scale systems to actually make use of artificial intelligence to deliver real-time content to the world. We built recommendation engines. We built all these systems in order to match people with the right content. After that, I used to be in charge of Uber's self-driving car program. I led the team that put the first self-driving car fleet onto the roads. in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The robot car used to pick me up every morning and drive me to work through the streets of Pittsburgh to get to the office. So you can say I'm a huge optimist about AI and how these technologies play out in our society. I mean, next in my career, I was the first CTO for the US Democratic Party. It's the oldest continuously running political party in the world. And I lived through the 2016 elections, I lived through the 2020 elections, and I saw how tech, data, and these systems were used as weapons effectively in these systems. Even today in 2024, we're sitting with half the world's population has some form of democratic election in 2024, and we've already seen what AI could do in elections in India. Indonesia was basically a Disneyland of deep fakes. We saw what was happening in Ireland with sexualized non-consensual synthetic sexualized imagery in their elections. Even in the US elections, we were seeing some impacts of deepfakes, such as President Biden's voice being used to tell people not to vote in one of our state primaries. So we're seeing all these ramifications of how AI plays out. But again, I still maintain I'm a huge optimist on how this all will work and what the opportunities look like. Today, I'm the chief technical officer at a group called the Emerson Collective. We're a company that invests in entrepreneurs and innovators who are driven by purpose and a sense of possibility. We're working to create a world of abundance for future generations. We think a lot about questions around immigration and migration in the world. We think a lot about questions around education and what opportunities look like. We look at things like the climate change and what's going on with our world, and we obviously look at health as the impacts there. These are all interrelated systems, and I think there are real opportunities in order to use things like artificial intelligence to actually try to further what humanity could look like. I'm also proud to serve on the board of directors of the TUMO Center in Yerevan and worldwide, where I've taught and given lectures. So I'm coming back to why I'm here. I actually think that Armenia has a really strong possibility right now to be positioned well in the future of both technology, as you all know, but also the future of artificial intelligence moving forward. I think we can obviously leverage our math-heavy educational system that was put in place in the Soviet era. And before it was called AI, it was called machine learning. And before it was called machine learning, it was just statistical modeling. And I was really struck by a comment from a person named Alex Pavlov, a partner to early stage tech VC, RTP Capital, that if you combine a scientific foundation with a startup culture, you have something outstanding. And that, for me, describes Armenia's position perfectly. And so I think that for a lot of us, we need to start thinking about what real opportunities look like and how we can actually grasp those opportunities. I spent a long time talking to technologists, entrepreneurs, to government officials, to religious officials on what the positions should be on artificial intelligence moving forward and what opportunities could really look like. I've been hosting a podcast for about 2 years now, mostly as a way to just learn more and interact with more people. And I've spoken to people like there is Bishop Paul Tai, who is actually the Vatican's person in charge of emerging technologies, and understanding from his perspective how AI could be really used to enhance what human life could really look like and actually bring us to what our fullest potential could look like. I've spoken to actors and actresses in Hollywood about their concerns about what artificial intelligence could be doing to disrupt their industry and what it means to be signing contracts that are taking your imagery and using it in many different ways, potentially without your knowing, frankly. If you're a background actor, maybe you get scanned as part of one of your contracts, and all of a sudden you're now showing up in all these different movies. So there are opportunities but concerns that we need to figure out how to balance. I've spoken to people like Maria Reza, the Nobel laureate, who thinks a lot about what disinformation could look like when it's interacting the world. She's been effectively in a war against Facebook and Facebook-like technologies and how they're playing out worldwide with disinformation and misinformation being spewed all over their databases. But at the same time, she's also building potentially an AI-powered news organization and trying to figure out how to actually disseminate information correctly throughout the OLT. So I think we have to be thinking through what a balance could look like of positives and negatives and try to figure out how to plot a middle path through it all. So I think Armenia's embrace of AI could not come at a better time. In the US, AI has captured about 30% of all the tech investments in 2023 and about 17% of the capital that was invested in Europe. And so within this category, 60% of US investment is now going toward generative AI inside that 30% AI investment in total. So I think there's a huge influx of capital right now that can also be leveraged. And if we look at what the smaller countries are doing that have embraced these type of technologies to drive economic growth, we're starting to see people like Finland and others really starting to pop on the map on what AI and these future emerging technologies are looking like. One of the things I did is spoke to this professor named Perouz, based out of Finland. And what he did in 2017 is he launched what he called the age of artificial intelligence. Like the whole country did an emphasis on AI education and skills training at all levels to quickly make Finland be one of the top global competitors in artificial intelligence. And this was before the generative AI movement even really kicked in. So they positioned themselves really well. And if we look at what they've done on AI and AI accelerators, for a really small country, they have one of the largest per capita startup ecosystems going on within AI technologies. And I think there's a real opportunity there around AI, decision-making, robotics, etc. Estonia, which adopted digital government services at national level, just worked with its top university to launch the Estonian Center for Safe and Trustworthy AI to really try to lead the EU into a conversation about what ethical deployment of AI looks like. So again, small country hitting completely above its weight on what the potentials look like. And Norway even created something they call Startup Norway, which is part of the government's $1.1 billion entrepreneurship plan that's really trying to bring funding and mentorship and resources to grow AI-enabled tech businesses. So we can start to see patterns showing up around the world of smaller countries really trying to hit above their weight and trying to figure out how to spark these type of innovative things going on inside their ecosystem. In fact, like even Sweden, which is one of probably the earliest adopters, they started giving citizens wide access to computers and broadband internet in the 1990s, which really positioned them well going into the 2000s and now the 2020s, effectively being a real tech innovator inside the European sector. And again, I think there are real opportunities we can learn from a bunch of these nations and the way that they're doing their work. So maybe if I try to distill this down, like what can Armenia do to become an AI powerhouse, and how can we sponsor innovation at all the levels? And so I want to look at this through three different time frames. Like, how do we make an impact today? How do we make an impact tomorrow? And how do we make an impact in the decades ahead? So first, I think one of the things that we should really be thinking about is how do we do educational system uplifting? So Armenia is already on track when it comes to technological education, but we need to reach all levels and stay ahead in order to build intellectual capital. I think some of the other guests on the stage are going to talk about this. I feel that this type of intellectual capital is way more valuable than most of the costly infrastructure you need to put AI in place today. So I think we really need to be thinking about what that means to inspire a set of young children. So let's start with educational system uplifting. There are things already going on in the country, things like TUMO, which is offering after-school education and digital skills to about something like 25,000 Armenian teenagers on a weekly basis. And we've already done independent evaluations that show that TUMO graduates are more likely to be employed with higher graduation rates, more jobs in technology centers such as programming and web designs. TUMO graduates are more likely to be entrepreneurs. But I think the thing that we should take from it, I mean, I'm clearly on the board and I'm biased, but I think the thing we should take from it is that there is an opportunity and in the possibility to actually inspire a bunch of children around creativity and thinking about problems and thinking about how to make impact in the world that will have carry-on effects in the decades forward. So if we look at other people doing work in this space, people like FAST, like the Foundation for Armenian Science and Technology, they're promoting invention and innovation in technology and using things like generative AI to cultivate talent starting in high school. So I think like combinations of these type of things in the education space could really hit in a disproportionate way to really uplift entire sectors for us. So we need to create incentives and training mechanisms for teachers to be using AI in their courses, and for us to be thinking about new teaching methods that can really try to like use these technologies to our advantage. And we need to breed computational thinking into all school curriculums, not just in the high school level. And when I mean computational thinking, I actually don't mean software engineering. What I mean is how to think about computers as part of our everyday lives, what those real opportunities might look like for us to think about how children should break down problems, figure out how to work on component parts, put it back together again. Coding and software engineering and all these things will come as side effects if we can just teach them to think computationally. And we also need to look beyond students to the rest of the population. Like I mentioned before, in Finland, what they did in 2018 is they actually released an online webinar to try to get to 1% of the Finnish population learning something about AI. And so Perouz, the professor in Helsinki, he created this online webinar. They started marketing it from the government. When they were done, 10% of the Finnish population watched this webinar about what AI opportunities look like inside Finland. And Teemu started getting letters, not just from government officials, not just from business owners, but plumbers and regular everyday people throughout Finland who'd watched this thing and have then written in and said, your webinar on AI has fundamentally changed the way I even think about my plumbing business or my contracting business. So I think there are chances for us to really inspire an entire population to just start thinking about what AI could really do. There are elements of AI course is open source, it's free, it's something that we could think about either adopting and trying to figure out how to make contextually relevant for us or culturally relevant to us. They also did like their level 2 and level 3. They taught people how to program in Python. They created master's programs in machine learning and data science and AI. And they actually even looked at what data science and the humanities could look like to try to hit other people who are not just technical who are going into space. So I think examples like that are real opportunities for us to like inspire everyone to be thinking about this. Teemu said on my podcast that artificial intelligence is like electricity. It's going to shape our world in ways we cannot imagine, and mastering it will control how we live. And AI is power. In Finland, they believe AI belongs to everybody, and I think that's the kind of mentality that we should start thinking about. So another opportunity is we can think about how to sponsor educational approaches from within, working with people from like the Armenian startup ecosystem to develop practical but foundational knowledge. So people like employees from Service Titan, Code Signal, Service Learn, we can start to build partnerships. They're clearly using these advanced technologies to further their particular work. We should work with these organizations to take what they're learning, actually figure out how they're deploying it in the field, and educate as many people as possible. We can have their employees be teaching assistants. We can be sponsoring projects, competition, mentorship opportunities. So I think it's really important for us to figure out how to promote lifelong learning and skill development for all working age Armenians. Finland has shown us that that is possible, and it actually has massive effects for years moving forward. And so we need to make sure that we're not short-term focused on like we need to teach kids how to code today. Yes, that is true, but we also need to be thinking about what these long-term real opportunities look like. So I touched upon this as well, but we really also need to think about what cultural embedding looks like if we want to think about AI being infused into every single portion of our lives, if we really want to become that AI nation for the world. So we need to figure out how to bring AI topics to every single AI things to every single topic in our communities, both in tech, but within the country. So, for example, we could be hosting a yearly conference on AI that explores both the science fiction future that we want to live in and targeted toward a general audience. Like imagine a youth-based science fair where we are actually giving prizes to Armenian children who are doing AI projects at every single level. It doesn't really matter what it is, but just the fact that they're thinking about it could be amazing. We could be starting conversations on stage with government officials and company owners to start sharing knowledge on how people are trying it. I spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill in the US, and I contend a lot of the biggest advantages for AI are actually going to be behind the scenes in the world's most boring places. Like, it's how do you write a job description faster, or how do you write a policy brief faster? And I think just even sharing those stories so more people could be doing it, I think could be really interesting. We could be doing art conferences and film conferences all using generative AI. The French in Paris are launching a movie series all built on generative AI, just as a way to see what would happen. So we could be leading the way on experimenting on just crazy ideas on the hopes that 1 out of 10 ideas might actually work. But we could just be trying things to try to get everyone inspired and excited about it. Stepping back for a second, we also need to think about what legislation in Armenia should look like to really inspire and make sure all this ecosystem works correctly. I spend a lot of time in the US talking about what data privacy looks like for American citizens, how that interacts with EU policy and things like that. We could be making stances that Armenians also deserve the same kind of digital data privacy, but I would argue that a real opportunity might show up in the healthcare sector if, instead of thinking about it in the, say, US model, but we think about more of a UK model of what the NHS has done for data pooling, which allows them to actually then start training statistical models on their entire population's health outcomes. We could be putting legislation in place to make sure that generative AI startups in the country, et cetera, have access to really large-scale data sets of the Armenian population so that we can be using this to further our commercial interests on how we can then provide services to the rest of the world. So I think smart changes around things like, again, data pooling on healthcare data, smart changes to things like copyright could allow us to actually then start training on large-scale Armenian written word and Armenian spoken content. I think we can outline principles for fair data governance and use guidelines for informational and ethical values that they've done in Finland and other places in the EU, but still enable like real innovation to actually occur. And then finally, one thing that I'm actually proud we have done in the US is we passed something called the CHIPS Act in 2022, which actually really allowed for US investment in things like semiconductors, creating jobs in manufacturing, supply chains, national security, etc. And then within the first week of the CHIPS Act package, tech companies invested 50 billion US dollars in things that could potentially spur us forward on the hardware side of AI and tech innovation. And I think that things like national security and healthcare incentives and things like that, like that's what we've done in the US. And I think there are, again, opportunities for us to think about how to actually cause investment to occur. It doesn't have to happen from the government side, but just providing pathways so private capital can start flowing into some of these big real opportunities. And maybe one of the last things I'll say is that there's also an opportunity for us to think about governmental uplifting. And I think to do that, like, again, Estonia was one of the first fully digital countries on the planet. And I think we have an opportunity to become one of the first AI-driven governmental entities on the world. And I think the way we do that is we start with having honest, off-the-record conversations with industry leaders, academic researchers, politicians, government officials to really understand what our opportunities look like, to really get all of us on the same page and see what possibilities there are, but also what the concerns are. We can have conversations about policy, data collection, data privacy, and figure out how we should start enshrining that. One of the things, again, we've tried here in the US is that we've had technologists embedded within committees in the US Congress. And these technologists work not only on helping create what the bills should look like, but they also shadow different governmental officials as they go through their everyday jobs, just to try to figure out, like, how can you make your job more efficient? And we could be doing the same thing. Like, imagine your high-tech minister with a software engineer that follows him around and it's just like, oh, you do this 10 times a day. We can just write code that would make that happen. Or same thing for prime minister or whoever. We can just be finding opportunities to infuse AI and technology throughout the governmental sector to really make sure we can move quickly. We can then use governmental investments to, we're doing an investment in a supercomputer. We can do governmental investments to try to spur those right types of innovation. But I think it really starts with getting government educated and getting government into a place where they feel like they can drive. So we need to also make sure we get the right talent in the right places. Before I close, I know I've talked about a lot of things. There are clearly risks here. You know, AI is probably going to be one of the biggest sucks on the energy sector in the world, potentially also the water sector in the world. So I'd like to think about how we can make those risks into opportunities. Like, are there ways to think about what green AI looks like, what water safe AI looks like? I think that we can all be thinking about those questions, especially for a nation like Armenia, and how that actually plays out. But again, I look at this as massive opportunities, not necessarily a downside. So, I just wanted to close by reminding us all what those few things I said are. I think we need to think about educational uplifting and educational reform. We need to think about a cultural embedding of AI throughout our society. We need smart legislation to pull that off, and we need to do some governmental uplifting so we can have a real partner at the table as we're starting to build all these technologies and infuse it in our society. I've spoken a lot, Raffi, but I just want to lay those out. I'm looking forward to the conversation moving forward.
Thank you, Raffi. That was incredible. Actually, I think we purposefully wanted Raffi to kind of set the stage to talk about AI on a broad basis, and so it took a little bit longer than usually we would allocate to one speaker. But I think it was super important. And I mean, I have 100 questions I'd like to ask, and we'll come back to many of those. I'd like to turn next to Perouz. I've known Perouz for quite some time. She taught at AUA, has a PhD in mathematics, and is now working in the private sector. Actually, for full disclosure, ServiceNow used to be a competitor of mine when I was a TeamViewer, so it's interesting to kind of add that dynamic here as well. Perouz, I think, if we think about the totality of what AI can do, and if we think about, and one question we're going to come back to is sort of, this is one of the first technologies where the advancement in the technology itself and the use of that technology are competing, right? So you don't know sort of where to put your resources more in terms of, do I build more things like more, large language models or specialized models, or do I really put all of my focus on how do I use it effectively? I think your company is really kind of dealing with, in particular, your group. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And I know that you were part of a workshop on AI that took place here in Armenia this summer. So let me pass it on to you. Thank you, Perouz.
All right, thank you, Raffi, for that intro. And yes, I work at ServiceNow. It's been quite some years now. I am in the ServiceNow research group, where the group is focused on mainly doing cutting-edge research that eventually seeps into the products of the company. Our research basically scale is we look at in research for the next 1 or 2 years. That's our horizon. And one of the things that my team, my group specializes in is multimodal foundation models. These are models that can understand and generate language, images, music, speech, and all sorts of modalities. So in the context of ServiceNow, let me just give you first a brief overview of what ServiceNow does. ServiceNow is a platform company. They have a large platform that they sell to enterprise customers, and the clients can then build their own modules they need on this platform. For example, they want an accounting module, an HR module, IT ticket handling system, etc. So since ChatGPT, the company has very swiftly switched to focusing on integrating AI into their products. Now, I must say that, first of all, I feel that we are living in very revolutionary times for technology. It's true, the internet in the 90s was big, the iPhone was big, but generative AI is huge. And it does have the potential to revolutionize the way we do business, to be integrated in a wide range of aspects of our life, of the way we work, and it has made its integration very easy. Because right now we have an interface whereby machines understand what we want, as opposed to us trying to understand how to operate this machine. And this makes things so much easier and so much more accessible. So coming back to ServiceNow, my role and our role as the research group was to find ways to integrate the research that we already were doing on language models. We were already doing work on time series analysis, etc. How to integrate this into the product. And in fact, the past 2 years, the company has integrated so many AI-related modules into their platform in a very, very fast pace. Just last week was our recent release, and we released about 30 or 35 new AI capabilities into the system. These capabilities include things like chatbots that would help you identify problems with your computer, to analytical engines that would tell you if there are anomalies in your time series based systems that you may be collecting, let's say from your IT infrastructure. I can say that the customer love it. Many of these requests were coming from clients that once they knew what AI can do, what generative AI can do, kept asking for all these capabilities in the system. Now, for the platform, what the company envisions in the near future is for it to evolve into a platform of AI agents. This would mean that instead of building an HR system, let's say, onto the platform, you will be able to build your own AI agents, and these are small, let's say, software modules that would do the work for you, with you, operate on your behalf, and take off some of the more boring load from your shoulders as an enterprise or as a worker. So these are the things we are working on. Now, what do all these things mean for Armenia? Where does Armenia come in? So as Raffi mentioned, this summer I was here for the Armenian LLM Summer School. So with a friend of mine, Kassarjian, and many other collaborators and organizers, one of them was Hrant, we put together this summer school program. And the idea initially was to bring together a set of, we were thinking, 40 students and professionals who would come and listen to topics and trainings about generative AI. How do you train foundation models? How do you fine-tune them? What is their architecture? And we brought many specialists from around the world to Armenia to give these lectures. The first positive surprise I had during this process was that as we were expecting 40 people to apply, we got more than 100 applications, and they were all looking great. And we said, okay, let's filter them out. Let's give them a test to do, and let's see how many of them will pass the test. And after administering the test, 80 people had a solid A in the test. And that was then when we kind of went back to the drawing board. We said, okay, we need to expand. We went back to our sponsors. We said, we need a bigger room. We need more GPUs. We're going to take in more people. And we took in 80 students who came to the summer school. And the second very positive surprise I had was that these students were there for 7 days, from morning till night. They were asking the smartest questions. They were very motivated, very excited about the topic, and very engaged with the speakers, with the topic. Language, well, the lectures were being run in English. Language was not a barrier. And this was a very, very positive sign for me, which makes me believe that Armenia has so much to contribute in this AI ecosystem, just based on the people and the talent that we have in this country. And this is something that needs to be nurtured, needs to be encouraged, and needs to be invested in. Invest in the people.
Thank you, Perouz. What were, kind of from your perspective, the best outcomes of this workshop? Like, I mean, you mentioned that there was a lot more talent than you'd anticipated. Kind of, what did you hope to achieve, and what was achieved, and what could be next? What to continue what you guys are doing?
So one outcome that I'm hoping we had is increased knowledge and increased excitement. We hoped to also know the students, and if any of them need some research opportunities, if we can help them get these opportunities here or abroad, start collaborations, and these were the kind of second-hand effects that we wanted to have. One other outcome is that we will possibly be coming back to do this workshop again, given that it was very popular, and this is something that we're working on right now.
Okay, thank you, Perouz. I'd like to turn now to, whoops, sorry, can you hear me? Yes, to Hrant Khachatrian. You know, many would say that Hrant is like the poster child for AI in Armenia. He's been involved from the very beginning, and one of the things that makes Hrant so valuable, I think, to this country is that he really believes not just in driving the technology forward, but making sure that subsequent generations get the proper education and training to do that. So, you know, Hrant splits his time between actually working on private sector projects and making sure that we have the sort of educational continuity and the infrastructure in place to be able to continue this kind of innovation. So, Hrant, let me turn it to you. Maybe you could talk a little bit more specifically about what's going on with AI in Armenia? Where do you see the potential for us to compete globally in AI? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Raffi. If you want to describe the landscape of AI in Armenia, there are like maybe 4 sections of that. One is the industry, right? So there is, I think, maybe several dozen, like more than 50 companies in Armenia that have AI-related talent so that they can build AI into the software that they produce. There are some companies that are like pure AI, like their entire product is AI. There are companies that had products before AI and now they are adding more AI into them. And there are companies that are providing consulting services. So there are like maybe 10 companies in Armenia whom you can ask and they will come and solve your problems. To have these companies, you need an educational pipeline, right? So that's the second pillar. So in terms of this, there are several initiatives across the entire spectrum, right? So there is this Generation AI program at FAST, which is happening in high school level. There are several undergrad programs in Yerevan State University, in other universities that provide some ML education. There are master programs like dedicated to AI, and some of them are pretty good. With PhD programs, there are some issues. There are PhD students who defend in AI and become PhDs in AI, but it's not really formal yet. And I'm personally working with the government to make sure that these things can be more aligned sooner than later. The other aspect is research. So what kind of AI research is happening in Armenia? There are a couple of groups. One of them is our group, and we attempt to produce like a pretty high quality research to be competitive at a global scale. And then there is an aspect of usage of these products in Armenia, which is before ChatGPT era, it was like extremely low. So the entire industry in Armenia that was developing products with AI, the target customer base is not in Armenia, right? So the Armenian government is not a target, Armenian businesses are not the target. So a lot of tech in Armenia does not really serve Armenia's needs, which is both good and bad, right? It's bad because we could utilize this potential and then improve our businesses and government. But it's also good because it means that the quality of the technology that is produced by Armenian companies is competitive globally, right? So I think that was the stage, like I would say, before ChatGPT. So now with ChatGPT, era, as we call it, things are starting to change. So the biggest thing that is changing is that now AI is available to directly to customers, right? Like everyone can use their phone or computer to use AI, and the quality of the AI that they are using in their mobile phones is literally the best in the world, right? So no one anywhere in any of those large companies or even US government has a better AI than we have in our pockets, right? So this enables an entire opportunity for Armenian businesses, and I would say like even at a personal level, like for every professional who works in any field can utilize AI and improve her own efficiency. So this is one thing that became kind of possible over the past 2 years. And I believe that, just like Raffi said, there is a lot to be done in that to make sure that, I don't know, the Finland example was like target 1% of the population. Maybe you could target like, I don't know, 50% of the population so that everyone becomes a power user of AI, right? It's like Microsoft Excel, right? So there are a lot of people, there are like entire communities that teach each other how to use Microsoft Excel properly, and none of them can develop an Excel by themselves, right? So the same is going to happen to the new generation of the powerful Microsoft Excel is these AI systems like ChatGPT. So below that, we have a layer of product companies that can develop specific products for specific companies and for specific audiences based on the technology that is available through OpenAI and Google and others, right? So this is also a very big opportunity because a lot of these very powerful AIs do not get into our lives just because there is not a good interface, there is not a good user experience to leverage this knowledge of AIs, right? For example, my favorite example is in education, right? So in Armenia, we have a serious shortage of STEM-related teachers in the entire country, right? But now, like every mobile phone, which is available to almost everyone, has an AI that can cover the content of the entire school curriculum of literally every subject, right? But it's not convenient. I mean, you cannot replace a teacher with this AI, right? So someone has to find a right way of integrating these AI into schools so that wherever you have a problem of the teacher not understanding physics, for example, you can have some backup AI somewhere that seamlessly helps the teacher to teach physics, right? So the technology is there, but the user experience is not. So I believe that in the upcoming years, there will be solutions in this type of fields. And to make these things happen, you do not even need an AI engineer. So a lot of software engineers who are building software or hardware products, they can actually build on top of the AI that is available and create these products. So yeah, having AI expertise is good. You will be able to do the same thing faster and so on. But in general, I already see service companies in Armenia that did not have AI expertise, and now they are building like ChatGPT wrappers for several clients, creating products for them. So this is the second layer. So the first layer was usage, the second layer was product creation on top of ChatGPT and others. And then underlying my favorite layer where I live is about building your own AI technology. And here I think one of the most important directions of AI, which is about text AI, like natural text understanding and text processing, question answering, like this type of AIs, I believe we cannot compete anymore. So we are already late to this game, and we will never be able to create a ChatGPT competitor, even in Armenian, even specific, even anything, right? Because the amount of hardware needed to create an AI at the level of what OpenAI is doing is like enormous. It's like more than the budget of Armenia, right? It's this couple of companies, actually there will be 4 or 5 companies in the end, Google, Anthropic, maybe OpenAI, Meta, and probably XAI. So they will dominate this market. And I think that when we think about investing in AI research now in Armenia, we should not target those things that will be easily covered by these large companies. So I believe that even text, not only text, but even audio and video are not, we cannot compete with those type of products in the next 5 years, right? Like right now we compete, by the way. For those of you who don't know, there are companies in Armenia like Crisp and Podcastle that are developing audio technology that is like really state of the art. But like in 5 years, I bet all of them will be using something that OpenAI has built, right? And they will serve it to their customers. So my plan, and I'm trying to kind of preach this to everyone in Armenia, is to focus on data types, or as we call modalities, that are not text and audio and video. So we suggest to focus on things like molecules, biology-related stuff, DNA, proteins, or I don't know, radio data, radar data, or material science, and this type of weird types of data that are currently out of focus for these large companies because they have like larger pieces of cake that they are looking forward. So they do not invest like 10,000 GPUs on molecules, right? Or I don't know, on material science. So I think we should build capacity in those like more rare directions or not so obvious directions, so that once the technology wave comes to these areas, so I strongly believe that the next wave of huge AI-driven companies that will be very valuable in the world will be in biotech, will be in robotics, and these companies will need a different kind of technology, a different kind of AI research, and what we are doing now, we are trying to invest in those directions to capture the next waves, because as I said, I believe that we missed the wave of text, right? So to do that, we need research groups, we need investment in research infrastructure. This year, Armenian government allocated $8.5 million to develop some AI infrastructure, which is like GPUs, and we're working to make it happen at Yerevan State University. I think maybe in March or April it will be up and running. So this will enable our students and our researchers to work on one level higher than they can do right now. And we focus all our efforts towards this biology, robotics, radio stuff. I believe that we should continue investing in this type of infrastructure, and we should continue investing in people who can actually develop the next generation of technology, so that in like 5 years, we capture a larger piece of the cake of AI industries. I think that's it.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. That was fantastic. My first question actually goes to all of you. There seems to be these two modalities about how AI is changed, or where we should invest and where AI sort of research and development should go. One is around, Hrant, what you just mentioned, which is creating models that are a little bit more specific, that are addressing specific modalities, because we're not going to compete in large language models. That's sort of investing in the AI technology itself, right? Specific branches within AI. The other approach, which both you and Raffi and actually Perouz mentioned, is how do you use AI effectively, right? So it's kind of the incorporation of existing AI technologies into creating not just new products, but new ways of addressing problems, right? I mean, I think the simplest one that many of you in the audience might be familiar with is the whole area that's burgeoning called prompt engineering, right? So, you know, for the first time with ChatGPT, you could ask any question and get in English and get an English language response. But what quickly happened is that you learn that you have to, sort of ask follow-up questions to get to exactly what you're looking for. So that's a very simple, frankly, non-technical. You don't need a huge STEM education to be able to ask intelligent sort of sequence of questions to get to your answer. So I kind of want to go back to what Raffi mentioned around computational thinking and how do we become better consumers of existing and future AI technologies to develop globally competitive products and services. So I'll open it up to whoever wants to take that first. Raffi, we can give you a chance if you'd like, just because you're online, and then we'll ask Perouz and Hrant to follow as well.
question. I look at it as, I mean, this is all a bunch of portfolio management, in my opinion, of just like what do we need to do today in order to prepare us to tomorrow, and how do we like create the proper mix of all these things. I like to think that like, to Hrant's point, that we kind of missed a particular wave and we need to be better positioned for the next one. So I'm really excited that people like Hrant are thinking about what specialized versions should look like. And we definitely need to do an investment there, in my opinion. But I also think that we really need to think about, the one interesting thing about AI as it intersects with society is it forces us to contend with a lot of our fundamental things because things are just moving quicker. So we need to think about like, what does education and job retraining look like? What does it mean to get an entire population to be AI literate or AI fluent? And I think like for those, we should be starting right now to figure out exactly like what you mentioned, Raffi, is just like prompt engineering, embedding it into like the boring things that are happening behind the scenes. Like every back office should be using AI in some way to automate some of their tasks. Like I like the analogy of thinking of it like Excel. It's going to be just one of these tools in a tool chest. And we need to rapidly get to that point, because I also contend that once we get to that point, our imaginations will open on the kinds of things that we want to throw our deep research at or our deep application usage at. Like I think Hrant has like some really great ideas, but I want a million Hrants thinking about all the things that we should be working on and then coming up with the best ideas possible. So I want to start doing some of those investments in society right now. And so I don't know what's the appropriate mix, but we clearly need to be looking at that sort of like that 5-year to 10-year time frame as well, of just trying to get us to be the most AI literate country or place in the world to pull this off.
Thank you. Perouz?
Okay, so coming back to your question about how do we integrate AI into our products, I think this is still kind of an open problem because it's still developing. We get used to using AI, and at the same time, AI is getting close to us, the way we think. But I think this wave of technology has the potential to be closer to the way we work anyway, right now, than in previous times. And this is what makes it so popular and, so to speak, easy to integrate into our workflows. I can't claim that we or any company has found the best combination yet, but I think that it's not too far from getting there. I want to add one point, maybe to respond to Hrant. I don't think I completely agree with you about what we should invest in. I think that this is the researcher in me speaking. I think now is the time to innovate. I don't believe that transformers are the answer to having language models. They can't plan, and there are many problems with it. And if we want to innovate for the next 5 years or 10 years, now is the time to start thinking about something crazy that might actually work and might replace the transformer architecture on which current foundation models are based on. That's it.
Yeah, I see. Thanks for the comment. That's even lower level of research that is obviously can be done. Sure. Responding to the other question about expanding the usage. So I believe that the best users of Microsoft Excel can use it in ways that Microsoft Excel developers could not even imagine. And I think it's happening in AI as well. So some of the best ChatGPT users I know are not AI experts, right? So especially because I think maybe there is even a negative bias. Like if you are building it, you assume that you know how it works, but it works a little bit more complicated than you think it works. And someone with a wider imagination and without the biases you have can find a better use cases. So in my mind, when I think about promoting AI usage education, that might be the best way to do that might be even outside of the AI engineer community, right? Like maybe it should be an industry on its own that develops these techniques on how to properly use AI, does its own research in a way that follows the latest advancements and tries with every new AI that it's appearing, right? And then promoting this and then forming communities where people talk to each other about it, tell about the new usages of that. Like, it's already happening, right? I don't know. My friend Vazgen Hakovjanian sometimes comes in, if you write this after your prompt, it will work better. I just realized it and so on. So this is already happening, and a lot of it will happen outside of the communities that actually develop these AIs. So this is a good opportunity because we will always have shortage of AI developers, right? So if we can find kind of new human resources that would handle the expansion of usage of AI, that's kind of very efficient. So I would invest in that direction, in expanding the usage. Like, leave AI researchers alone, let them develop the next edition of their AIs, and engage more people in the process of figuring out how to best use AI in certain use cases and teach it.
Does that mean we need to change the way we think about STEM education? Or what the objectives of STEM education are?
I have no idea. I really don't know what is the answer and when this Microsoft Excel usage combines with STEM education. I think it combines at some point, but I don't know the answer, like at which point you can switch. Because recently I'm talking to young people who are actually making money by providing AI solutions that they have no idea how AI works. I already see this happening.
To add something to what Hrant said is actually this idea of building an AI and then waiting to see how people are going to use it and learning from that. I think it's something that also OpenAI does a bit. Like a few days ago when they released their O1 model,
yes.
It's kind of like, we don't have a purpose for it, use it and then we'll see what we can do. It feels like that's how it is, and yeah, that definitely is a way, something that's happening right now.
Actually, just on that point of the O1 release, right? I mean, they introduced this thing called multi-step reasoning or chain of thought reasoning, which actually made that model much more effective at solving math problems or sort of dealing with abstract logical constructs as opposed to just sort of, generating text based on what's there. Now, I'm going to go to some of the questions from the audience, and there's sort of two categories of questions. One is, how can we use AI to improve everything from the economy to health and things in Armenia? So basically, sort of what are the areas in which we think AI can help sort of drive forward societal and economic development in Armenia? And then, so let's take that first. And the second one will be, and maybe Hrant, you answered part of this, is where should Armenia invest in developing solutions that can compete globally?
Okay, so investing in direction. So I think an important piece that is missing in Armenia, and it's not related to AI, unfortunately, it's very general, is that government did not yet learn to invest in solutions that is useful for the government and use that to boost the education, research, and industry so that later these companies, these products can be sold to others, right? A lot of that happened in Israel. Like a lot of the tech talent that appears there goes through the pipelines of Ministry of Defense, right? So because the government invests there a lot and demands solutions, and once you have large number of people working on the solutions that their government wants, then after kind of graduating it, they become pretty good experts and are available for the industry. And that is why you have a lot of tech companies present there and so on. So this is something that we need to work on, and again, it's unfortunately not related to AI. This is a general mindset and internal capacity of the government to actually invest in solutions that are needed for themselves, right? So this part, I think, is a very large missing piece in Armenia that would boost many fields.
So maybe you can, since the government's spending all this money on creating this GPU cluster, maybe you can say one of the benefits back to the government is to use the the output of what the cluster is doing.
Yeah, so I see some interest from the government to use the outcome of these GPUs. Yeah, we're talking about it. I don't think that whatever the government needs right now actually needs these GPUs. So there are lots of other things that government needs that can be done without any GPUs, and we're not there yet. But yeah, maybe this can be an additional motivation to ask for products that actually require some of these GPUs.
But this can be also thought of as the same question we were dealing with before, which is like, what's the best way to interact with AI? And let's see how people use it. I think if the government invests in GPUs that are being used by local startups, and based on what these startups bring to us, what they build, and the government can also, it's a cycle, right? Tap into that technology that's being built, and we can have this similar cycle that you discussed about Israel being an engine that feeds the government and then feeds into the economy at the same time.
We had a question about, let me read it. As a conflict-ridden region, I'm worried about the application of AI in warfare. Does the panel have any insight to share? Basically, both kind of from our ability to create solutions that help us and also to defend against possible uses of AI in warfare against us.
Yeah, so I'm sure that a lot of technologies in warfare that use AI will be first tested on us, as many other technologies in the past years. So the first reaction to that is definitely to invest in people who understand these technologies, because if you don't understand this technology, you cannot even think about defending from them. So that's the first obvious step. If you have enough people understanding it, then some of them will be working on countermeasures, and yeah, probably some of them could work on warfare by themselves, right? So again, this is an obvious place to invest, and this is again due to the, how should I say, like the tradition of the government to work with the scientists and with engineers and with industry does not allow currently to make it happen efficiently, right? It's even if some of the military industry companies use AI in their products, none of it is really guided by the government. So this entire system in Armenia is like working in reverse. So the industry is building something, proposing to the government, convincing the government that it is good, and then maybe government will fund it. So there is no proper request from the government to this field, and it's, again, far beyond AI.
Despite that, I should say that whoever was at the session on national security, the Secretary of the National Security Council said that our investment in domestic defense tech production has gone up, from the budget, has gone up 100 times from around 2020. And a lot of that is going into AI-enabled solutions. Some of those AI-enabled solutions have been used successfully. So we can't talk about them openly, but that definitely is happening. I have a question for Raffi. How can we learn from the EU Digital Act and create similar regulations in Armenia, as well as any thoughts on AI regulations, especially around AI sextortion scams or things like that? So I think the question is really what is the global experience around regulation and managing AI more successfully? What are the best practices that can be used in Armenia?
Thanks for that question, Raffi. I mean, actually going back to one of the previous things that we're talking about, I think one of the biggest, highest leverage things that we could be doing from the governmental side, yes, we should be thinking about defense tech. I'm in a mixed bag on investing in GPU clusters and things like that from the governmental side, but I think one of the biggest things we can do is something we've been talking about for a while here, is like, how do we get the entire population using AI, like from all levels? Like, how do we get children in school thinking about how to use AI, to people working in back offices, to people doing the boring jobs. I think that then is a way to create demand and create innovation to really occur over the long run, because it opens the imagination of the country on what is possible and the things that we should go do. So putting that aside, I think there's a lot to be learned from what global regulation looks like right now. I will say that most of global regulation is usually on the form of harms mitigation as opposed to innovation right now. And I think we should be thinking about portions of that. I think digital privacy is an important thing for us to be worried about. I think because these systems are very data hungry, and if left to commercial actors to be fully left to their own devices, I used to be in the commercial sector. I'm not saying that commercial sector is bad, but the incentives are set up in such a way that they're going to want to eke into our digital privacy as quickly as possible. So we should be thinking about what smarter regulations look like to provide people with control over what their data is and where it's going, but allow us to then still spur real innovation in healthcare, in large language models if we need more corpuses of data, but just data in general. I think a lot of what the government could be doing is actually preparing us for an AI world in a way that we organize our data sets, we make sure it's available, we already have the processes by which to get it, we don't have all these huge hurdles that we need to cross. We just sort of streamline the processes in the right place. I think my NHS example from the UK is sort of the best one I have right now, which is a lot the UK allows researchers to get access to large scale longitudinal data across the entire British population of what health outcomes look like. And that can be used not just by medical researchers, but also by computer scientists and others as we try to figure out what opportunities really look like. So I think smart regulation on ways to actually enable us to move quickly and safely, I think are really important, not just taking the EU stance of risk mitigation, but actually spurring what potential investment looks like. And again, I think those are then also an avenue to do these aperture opening things where the entire society can see what the benefits are. And then we'll create the next generation of entrepreneurs and researchers who will want to be working on what the next thing beyond the transformer looks like, or what applications in defense or healthcare looks like.
Yeah, I think that what EU is doing with the regulation is they're shooting on their foot. It's not that there are many AI-oriented good initiatives in Europe, and with every new act, the number of these things will not grow. For countries like us, I don't yet have a full, proper understanding on what should be done, because there are regulations that are trying to regulate at the level of the development of these tools, and then there are something that is used that is regulating the usage of these tools, right? So in terms of development, I think we should not do anything, because I mean the 99% of the strong AIs that we're going to use will not be developed in Armenia. It doesn't make sense to harm any of the small teams or companies that will try to develop something. And in terms of regulating usage, again, I'm not sure how efficiently it can be done. One idea we discussed with my friend who is a lawyer was that maybe the government should now regulate at the level of monitoring, just force everyone to kind of report what you are doing, but not limit on what you are doing, so that we can collect data to see how things are evolving, how things are used, so that later we have a better understanding of the risks and problems, and then start to regulate the risks. And a lot of that is already happening without governments. The system is designed in a way that both OpenAI, Google, and others have a lot of internal incentives to make sure that their products are not used in a harmful way, because their PR problems are probably more expensive than the regulators can cause them. So they have a lot of internal reasons to regulate the usage. And maybe some of these experiences can be learned from these large companies and enforced to other smaller companies once they appear.
Okay, I have a question about basically the cultural aspect of this. So one of the big criticisms of large language models is that they tend to be biased because they're based on sort of what is the largest available set of data, right? So and there have been criticisms about sort of racial biases or gender biases or other things like that, because the bulk of the data that these models are being trained on sort of come from these, let's call them preferred groups, right? So if we go back to a country, or actually a nation, not just a country, right? A race like Armenians, which is small, we represent a very small part of the global population. Our language is, similarly spoken by a very small part of the global population. What do we need to do to ensure that there is enough investment in either the development of AI or the use of AI to be able to continue to enrich our culture and make sure that we don't fall behind?
So, so I think the answer to that is to be proactive as a culture and as a country and have our own AI strategy and our own, in this era, language model. Not started from scratch, but have something that we maintain and serves our purposes. It is more aligned with our values, our language, and our basically cultural structure, societal structure. These models are biased, yes, and they are biased in favor of the people who are building them first. And all conversation about AI bias comes later, after these models are already released to the world. If we want to be in control of this process and have our own AI, let's say, language model, then I believe we need to have our own data sets that we make public for others to use if other groups want to train their models. This is very important, and maintain our own language model.
So let me push back on that, or maybe kind of direct the question towards Hrant. I mean, I've seen my kids have used examples of, can you take a sort of a famous, I don't know, a Site Nova poem and then set it to some kind of, new, electronic beat and it actually produces it. So are we, I mean, is it really that we have to, sort of invest in our own language model, or is it more about sort of the adaptation of existing technologies that can be applied to the Armenian context?
What I was talking about was more about adaptation, because as Hrant mentioned early on, it's really hard for a country like Armenia to start from scratch and build these models, and there's no point, because these models exist, they already work very well. The question is about adaptation. And the second thing to be thinking about is licensing. A lot of these models are out there. You need a license to use. There are certain rules about how you can use them, etc. And any day, the company can pull the plug on them. If we want to be in control of this process, we need to maintain our own.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to this. I know that there were maybe tens of thousands attempts to develop search engines for this country or for this nation or something, but none of them worked. Okay, maybe Yandex worked in Russia. When you have like more than 100 million population, you cannot be a little bit self-contained. Maybe it works in China, but I don't think it works in India, for example, and in Brazil or in France or elsewhere. And I don't see why these AI systems will be different. So no matter how good AI we will develop, the kind of dissemination channels that actually reach the actual population, I think it's impossible to beat those guys. So one option would be to try to talk to them, like, I don't know, Google probably removes certain results from its search in different countries when these countries request. Maybe this kind of relationship can be built with the major players so that we have a kind of window, like a channel to talk to them and to say that, like if you're serving customers in Armenia, do not answer these questions, or I don't know. But other than that, I don't see anything that will practically work. Like it's very easy to say that let's build our own, let's invest there, let's pay us so that we develop our own, but I don't think it's much valuable. So one of actually government officials gave an idea that once Armenia manages to create its like a government-related mobile app that will collect a lot of your interactions to the government, like every citizen will eventually get this application in their mobile. Maybe that can be a distribution channel. Maybe there you could put another chat button which will run the Armenian LLM, but still, again, I'm not sure that people will switch from the ChatGPT on their phone to that local one. In terms of culture, I think, again, we have to kind of leverage this. Armenian artists and, I don't know, musicians and everyone else, just like every other professional, should look into the technologies that can help their work. So I cannot judge whether the AI is, the generated music generated by AI is good enough or something, but they can judge, and they should use it in a way that they feel appropriate, so that, again, in the competition, if there is someone in the neighboring culture that is leveraging AI and producing a lot of cool, I don't know, cultural material that attracts attention, we also need to work in that game and produce the next levels of the next stages of our culture. That's my rough understanding.
Thank you. A question for Raffi. It's actually a follow-up to the example you gave about Finland creating a webinar on the use of AI that they disseminate, where they reach 10% of the population. So the question is, to stay relevant, is there a population AI literacy level that must be reached for Armenia to stay relevant? Thinking previous technologies like printing, radio, phone, computers, internet access. So is there kind of a, or is that such a moving target because the technology itself is advancing so rapidly?
Thank you for that question. Actually, I want to maybe use the last question to help answer this question. I'm of the opinion, maybe similar to Hrant, that yes, probably someone should develop an Armenian large language model. Go and fine-tune Llama or go and fine-tune Olmo, like one of the open source ones, and start to actually make sure it can do Armenian properly. Although GPT-4o does Armenian well, maybe good, not well, but it's clearly making progress. But sure, for our own national sovereignty cases, take one of the open source ones, and someone should go do that. But I think the biggest and most important thing we can be doing, and I'm sorry to be a repetitive on this, is that we need to figure out how to get our entire culture using AI, our entire society just using AI. I think that could be one of the biggest leverage points for us. So like Hrant said, we should be playing a different game. There is no country in the world right now which is attempting to be the AI cultural center of the planet. And that could be an opportunity for us. Let's think about how to export Armenian music, Armenian paintings, Armenian works of art in AI-enabled ways. I think that could be a real big opportunity for all of us because, there aren't that many people, as you mentioned, Raffi, that speak Armenian in the world, but everyone in the world can appreciate art in a lot of ways. So we just need to play a slightly different game to become that AI cultural powerhouse. Now, to the level of population, we should be aiming for 100 in the grand scheme of things. Finland got to 10%, and that seemed to be a massive tipping point, somewhere in that 5 to 10% range. So I think that even if we can aim for 100, but even if 5 to 10% of a random population of Armenians are thinking about AI and emerging technologies in a different way, I think that would already set us apart. That number is way lower in the US. In the US context, I would not wager to say that something like 10% of US citizens are thinking about AI in any given way at any given point. We have many other things going on for stupid reasons. But I think that if we can get even in the single digits percentages, that would make a huge shift for us. But we shouldn't aim for that single digit. We should aim for the 100%. So we should be thinking about how do we produce television shows that talk about AI? How do we have artists using AI? We should be throwing festivals that are powered on AI. We should be doing all these things just as a way to spark the imagination of what might be possible.
Thank you, Raffi. I have another question for you. Actually, I think that's relevant to one of your previous experiences. So the question is, on a global scale, what are industries or areas that you fear for AI implementation or use for ethical, safety, or environmental reasons? And someone earlier today brought up kind of the classic example of driverless cars, right? If the car is in a situation where they're going to, hit one pedestrian or another. How does it make a choice on which one to hit? That's not a nefarious use of the technology, but it's certainly somewhere where moral or ethical issues come up. And we can certainly think about this in defense, where attacks are where decisions to attack are made automatically rather than by humans.
I like to think about, everything's an opportunity, so I don't think we should treat anything necessarily as something we should be scared about. It's a question of how do we correctly articulate our values and make sure our values are infused in the decisions or the systems that we're building that can make these decisions for us. So one of the things I think a lot about is sort of like what this human-computer interactions should look like, and how we should make sure that we build systems that are meant to enable human beings to make better decisions, not necessarily in all cases making decisions for us. So in the US context, we've experimented in some parts of the judicial system using AI systems to actually adjudicate cases, and we've decided that's not the best idea. In fact, it's outlawed in a bunch of different jurisdictions in the US. And instead, these systems are used to then inform judges and lawyers in order to make decisions better. Same thing in the healthcare context. Right now, the FDA won't approve many attempts to use AI to actually make final decisions, but they will approve allowing AI to make recommendations to an actual doctor to take a look at something. So I think it's a question of how do we make these value choices around automation versus augmentation? And I think we think about it in that frame, a lot of these things become opportunities and not things we should be scared about. So how do we feel, if we push the envelope a little further, I think we would feel okay in the defense setting if these systems are giving us information for generals to make targeting decisions, but weren't actually doing the targeting by themselves. In the driverless car example, it gets a little more fuzzy because these systems do have to make some choices, because they're making choices. When I built driverless cars, we were basically making choices around on the order of 60 times a second. It's a refresh rate that we were making decisions at. And in those situations, yes, the trolley question comes up as a hypothetical all the time. But I can say that, at least as a person who built these systems, if we think about stepping back, what are the values we actually care about, then we can figure out how to guide these systems correctly. What are the data sets we should be using to train them? So I don't necessarily look at anything as a concern, and more just how do we then build to the right mentality. Maybe the one area that I would maybe think about for a second is that the one detriment to open source AI right now is things like synthetic sexualized imagery, which is sort of showing up in a bunch of different places. So I mentioned before, in the Irish elections, it showed up as an attack vector against one of the people running for Ireland's parliament. They attempted to get her to get out of the race by releasing a whole bunch of synthetic, sexualized, non-consensual imagery. In the US context, there is probably what we call it CSAM, child sexual abuse material, that's showing up on the internet that's probably being created by a lot of these open source models. So in these cases, we do need to make value-based judgments of, in my opinion, the benefits of fully open science so we can better see and better protect ourselves outweighs some of these concerns. But these are the conversations we should be having, not should we use it or not, but what are really our values and how do we infuse those into the social technical systems that we're building.
Excellent. Thank you, Raffi. So we have less than 3 minutes left. So I'd just like to give the opportunity for Perouz and Hrant, if they have any last thoughts that they would like to share that we didn't share, so we can wrap up and try to get the program back on schedule.
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. So I think I'm going to come back to the question of Armenia and what we need to be a player in this AI ecosystem. I think what we need is a long-term AI strategy as a country. It should be comprehensive, it should be long-term, it should touch upon the different aspects of AI, the people, the specialists, as well as the infrastructure, and what we want from it as a country in the longer term. And whatever we decide to do, we need to have a conversation about these aspects and have a plan. We need to at least have a plan.
Great, thank you, Perouz. Hrant?
Yeah, my final thought is that as this is a conference that is also connecting diaspora, is I want to tell everyone who is listening that the tech and AI is growing in Armenia, and a lot of people are needed, and there are a lot more challenges and problems that we want to solve than we have people. So you can consider getting engaged and even relocating. So there are many opportunities both in research, maybe not data creative, but there are better opportunities in industry. For example, NVIDIA is happy to expand their team in Armenia, regardless of what you can see on their website. And there are many other companies in that, and not only in AI, like there is a newly born company that is developing a satellite that will be governed by AI once it's in the skies, and they are looking for a satellite engineer. So if you're interested in relocating and then contributing to more to the local tech and AI and tech in general, maybe reach out to me. We can talk and we can discuss what are the best opportunities.
Okay, I think we're at the end of our session. Thank you very much to all three of our panelists. Raffi, thank you for being up so early in the US. I hope for the audience this was helpful. I mean, it's such a huge topic, and I certainly, again, maybe raised as many questions as I think we answered. And I look forward to, and I wish everybody a good rest of the conference. Thank you very much.